The Knights of Ren podcast is brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., your source for Star Wars Destiny singles, sealed product, and more. Check them out at coolstuffinc.com.
Show me again the power of the darkness.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll. D20radio.com. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to the Knights of Ren, episode 308. With us are Rick, Jay, and our special guest, Todd. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing good.
Good.
Doing well.
So we've got a lot to cover on this week's show, so we're just going to jump right in, and Jay is going to give us a bit of a recap on some of the events he's gone to over the last few days.
So over this past weekend, I competed in another store championship over at Game Castle in Fremont, California. Unfortunately, my performance was only winning 2 out of my 3 matches. I hilariously was beaten by 3 different versions of Vader. Round 1, I got beaten by a Vader Raider deck I'm pretty sure was just an Awakenings deck. I don't think he played any SOR cards. And what was especially amusing was his Raider constantly either rolled his 3 side or he had a On the Hunt on him, which only rolled special. And he slurped the shields that I sometimes made and tried to defend up on my FN Django list that I was trying out, thinking that list might do better against a bunch of 2 people decks as opposed to 3 character lists where I felt my IG deck was stronger, but that did not appear to be the case, as that Raider alone cheesed me out with action cheating that I couldn't respond to, and he made my shield super irrelevant, which it's not that my deck is predominantly shields, but sometimes you roll it, sometimes you take them. But yeah, he just removed dice and constantly dismantled my normal sides, making all of my modifieds useless, and it was horrible, and I just had to laugh to myself. I was like, action cheating and shields not mattering in Awakenings. Here we go. I managed to beat a Han Rey player round 2, killing Han fairly quickly and gaining a lead. Round 3, I played against Young Vader Kylo, or Emo Kids, which I still count as a Vader deck. And he just exploded out of the gate with a really gross No Mercy, and before I knew it, FN was dead. So that just couldn't have gone worse for me. Then I played my buddy George, and he was trying out a base snap list, but he was about having as good of a day as I was, but I managed to take the win on that one before he could get a really gross It's a Trap off, and Baze fell pretty fast. And then to finish it all off, I played against a Vader Royal Guard, and he managed to Guardian most of my normal damage sides and then Price of Failure into a horrific 7 damage, and it just wasn't a match. And that's all she wrote for me, but I do want to give a very special shout out to Corwin, who we've mentioned a few times, is one of my playtest partners. He went head to head with another local named Brandon Francisco. They were the final match. Corwin playing Vader Raider and Brandon playing Pomaz. It was a really good finals. Brandon managed to pull it out, so I want to give a special shout out to him taking that event. He was not able to play for a decent amount of time because he wasn't able to get out to our normal stomping ground, so it was good to see him back and be able to come and play as if he hadn't been gone. So it was super great to see him, and it was that win was awesome. And also good job, Corwin. He played some really good games to get that far, so that was a pretty cool event. And then for Redemption, I went to a local store called Black Diamond Games, and I brought a new deck shown to me by some of the guys at Artificery again. Although this time, usually I'm barking up their tree to get a deck idea. Pearl Yeti, as you may have seen him on Discord, messaged me late Saturday night and was like, dude, you have to try this deck and help me prove that this deck's good. And I was like, I don't play Hero. And he said, exactly. And so It was a Luke Ray deck, and we're not going to go into heavy detail about it now because I want to keep some of it secret for the last store championship coming up next week. But it's pretty dope, and I managed to take down a quarter 3 tournament where, for whatever reason, we had a top 4. Overall, I'm pretty impressed with how the deck's performing, and I'm excited to share more about it. But for now, I need to continue doing some testing and trying out some changes, and not even kidding, getting used to playing Hero at a competitive level. But I look forward to talking about the deck in a future show.
Awesome. That sounds like a lot of fun, and I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about a hero deck, considering you've pretty much exclusively played villains since Awakenings came out. So we'll get to that in a future show. But now we definitely would like to introduce our good friend Todd. We met during Worlds. He was one of our roommates. He and Rick are playtest buddies. So before we get into the deck that you guys have been kind of testing and building over in the Nova area, we just like to do, the standard interview kind of stuff. So first off, we always want to know, what is your starting point or entry point into the Star Wars universe? Were you like a movie guy, or did you start reading the books and then you realized, hey, I'm going to watch the films? Like, where did you get your first start into Star Wars?
Totally a movie guy, man. I started all the way back with the original New Hope. I remember watching it over my dad's best friend's house when I was a kid. And then they actually took me to see Empire in theater, which was super awesome. And, was hooked ever since then.
How does that translate to Destiny? Like, where did you start playing card games competitively? And then, where did you step into, you found Destiny and realized, this is something you're going to enjoy and invest your time and effort into playing?
Well, I started back in the late 90s. Actually, that's how I know Rick. We started playing together, playing Magic back in the early 90s, Ice Age. Ice Age and Alliance block back then. And then from there, I got into the Decipher Star Wars game, and that was my first real card game love. I played that competitively for quite a while. Played in Worlds with that, state championships, a lot of different competitions with that. Traveled all over for that. And after that, I fell out of card games for quite a while. Probably for at least 10 years. 10 or 12, actually, and I got back in with Destiny. I had a friend of mine contact me. He's like, man, you got to check out this game, new Star Wars game. You're going to dig it. And he told me it had dice in it, and I was like, that's not really what I'm into. But I tried it, I like it, and I've been hooked on it ever since.
So what is it about Destiny that you find to be interesting? Because, you could be playing anything out there, but you're obviously playing this. So we'd love to hear your thoughts about, what Destiny is and what it means to you.
I think it's the fact that it's the polar opposite of every other game that I played, competitively at least, especially the old Decipher game. The old Decipher game was very well constructed, and you could always pretty much dictate how things played out based on how you build your deck. This game, you have that ability, but there's a lot more randomness added to it with the dice. There's ways to mitigate and change and manipulate them, but at the same time, there's still a lot more randomness to it, and I think that's actually what attracts me more to it now than it would have in the past.
That's actually really cool. One fun question we love to ask everybody is, what's your favorite Star Wars character? And you can pull from anything that's out there.
Oh, man, I think I'm going to have to go with Lando, because Lando is a pimp. He's the man.
All right, so that's a fair answer. Lando is actually very, very cool. So we'd love to hear the deck you're working on. And Rick has talked about his version, but obviously you have a different flavor of the Balatik Royal Guard FN deck. So why don't you guys just talk a little bit about, not necessarily the entirety of the deck, because we covered that in the last show, but just the differences in the cards you've selected and why you've made those individual choices, because Rick plays differently than you do, Todd, and so we'd love to hear why you've made these adjustments.
Well, the decks are actually very similar. Actually, I think there's probably only 2 or 3 cards that are different. I think one being the location. Rick has the War Room in his. I chose Frozen Waste with mine, only because I wanted to be able to control powerful character dice, Vader's, Emperor dice, Poe's dice, and at least put that fear into them. Even though it's a 3-character deck, the fact that if that site's in play, they have to consider that as an option for control as well. The War Room is also, it's a decent call. We've been going back and forth on what's better and what's the best for it, but I wanted to try that for this past store championship. It works. I still don't think it's the right call for it, but that's the one that I'm running currently. The other change that I have that's different from his is I run gaffy sticks over the F11 blaster. My consideration with that was for other FN decks. Was the main consideration for it. It's good. The damage on the damage on the die actually works very well with the guard and with FN. Doesn't match well with Bala or as well with Bala as the F11, but it still pairs well with the other two characters. But the disrupt side on it, I think, is really valuable, especially early game. If that's the upgrade that you get in your opening hand and you attach it to FN and roll it in and hit a disrupt, you can disrupt their resource and actually slow down another FN deck quite effectively, at least for a turn or two, which was kind of my other thought with it. It gave me two ways to use it. I could use it for damage, I can use it for control, and it redeploys. So, I mean, it's 6 in one, half a dozen in the other, I think, really.
Yeah, and I was just worried that Bala's modified sides would just kind of be sitting there too often without having more ranged sides in there other than the holdout blaster and, maybe the occasional rocket launcher die. So, that was just a consideration for that to try and make Bala a little bit better. But Todd's point's absolutely right. It's probably the better call now that I look back on it, because in the store championship last week, there was a lot of times where I just didn't even want to play the F11D unless I knew that I was going to immediately override it again with something else.
Yeah, and the other thing that I was doing with the gaffy stick, we were talking about this earlier, was I would have a vibro. Let's say I had a vibro, a Z6, and a gaffy out. I would actually, roll in my vibro and my Z6, and then add the gaffy into the mix and say I hit a special. Well, I would resolve all my other melee damage except for the vibro. And then I would use the special from the gaffy and target another character to weaken them up, to soften them up, in a way to set up for that Bala trigger, we like to call it, if it goes off. So you're weakening other characters, you're actually gaining more damage than you would actually gain from that one, but you've already used the Vibro's ability to get past shields and other mitigation.
Are there any other differences between your decks?
For this store championship, we added fair trade to the list as a way to kind of, one, gain more resources because the deck is a little light on it, and then two, also to fight the FN lists and Unkar, but more importantly, the 4-character endless ranks and the rise agains out of the blue, like Palpatine and Emo Twins, and occasionally in a Vader list, Awakenings Vader list. So what I took out of mine is I wasn't too happy with the two disarms in the list. I usually found a way to play one, but I never wanted to draw two. So I cut one of the disarms and the cannon fodder, where he cut the cannon fodder and the one electroshock. Yeah. I wanted to keep that electroshock because it's pretty good at getting rid of specials, and there's still a bunch of 2 and lower damage sides out there, so I like having a little bit more mitigation on there, but Todd likes the disarms. So that's really the only the list, and I think it's very valid points for either one of those, but that's the way we went with it. And back to the battlefield, we had talked about this the Friday before the store championship, that the battlefield, the Rebel War Room, is actually kind of bad in some of your worst matchups. The Funkar deck isn't a great matchup for you, and giving them that ability to resolve rocket launcher dice that they wouldn't normally be able to if you were able to keep them off their resources. And more importantly, the Emo Twins list, I was having a little bit of trouble with Emo Twins, and having a battlefield that they could choose on theirs and add some more shields to their side while still being able to help them out enough was kind of rough. But in the end, I felt that being able to resolve my dice when I otherwise couldn't, I stuck with the Rebel War Room. But again, that is one of the things that we're continuously messing with in this list, is just trying to find the perfect battlefield for it. And we're trying out a lot of things, but it's one of those things where you have to take it into account as how is this going to help my opponent, and are the matchups that they they're going to get a lot of use out of this, where they're going to be claiming a lot more than me. Is this helping me or is this hurting me? So his choice of Frozen Waste was a little bit, it's better in those matchups, and also it doesn't really hurt you too much. You're doing a lot of your damage with your upgrade dice in there, especially with the fact that you're going to resolve them, 2 and 3 times a round. So, losing a character dice isn't always the worst thing.
And you guys are playing out in the Nova crowd, so can you explain a little bit about the meta you're facing so people listening can get a grasp for, what is this deck facing, what is this deck coming up against, and, how it's performing out in the tournament scene?
So we're running the whole Eastern Virginia gambit here with running up to Nova for store championships. We kind of call Richmond our home office there for where we play at One Eye Jacks down there, but we're also going out to the Hampton Roads area, with Norfolk and Hampton and Newport News and stuff like that, where people are coming out from there. So we're hitting a lot of different metas, but they all generally remain the same. Northern Virginia has almost completely forced Po Maz out of the meta. Before the errata was the last time we were up there, and I think there was maybe 2 or 3 Po Mazes in a 40-person store championship. But it was very heavy on the Vader Raider, and a lot of 4-character lists. And, FN hadn't really kind of popped up yet when we were there. The Hampton Roads area was picked up more of the FN lists. They have a lot of Po Maz and a lot of Emo Twins and 4-character lists. And Richmond is actually very wide open. I mean, there's pretty much everything that you can think of as far as the top decks people are pretty regularly playing in tournaments out there. So this deck has been pretty well positioned for pretty much the entire meta. There are bad matchups. It's kind of rough against a Phasma list, Phasma with a Trooper and a Guavian. If they're running endless ranks, it can be a lot harder. If not, it's definitely winnable. I was able to beat one by a very good player in the top 4 of the store championships Saturday. But yeah, I mean, other than that, the Unkar FN Trooper can be a little tough if they get out their control package of Imperial Inspection and salvage stands. But basically, if you can get a 3 cost upgrade out pretty quickly, you're able to fight through it. But yeah, I mean, they were all there at the store championship we were at Saturday, and we were able to fight through it, and I eventually ended up winning it finally.
And I mean, I'd love to hear from you guys just a little bit of the history of this deck. Like, where did this idea come from? Because it's not traditional by any standard.
Well, you want me to take that?
Yeah.
All right. So as soon as I saw the errata list come out for fast hands and ammo belt, mainly the fast hands errata, we knew that Vader Raider was going to take a hit. We knew Po Maz was going to take a hit. So if you take those 2 out of the mix, or if you knock them down a peg, that leaves FN in a really good position to actually, if not beat them, mix it well with them. At least has a solid fighting chance with them. And based on the metas that we had been playing up north in Nova pre-errata, we already saw a strong contingency from 3 and 4 character lists up that way. And I don't know if you guys remember, I kind of like Rainbow Villain. My deck at Worlds was a Dooku Bala Trooper. So I like being able to pull from all factions and try and piece together the best cards out of all 3. So I guess I pretty much was sitting in my basement. I had looked at these 3 before and decided to just stack it all together and see what I could come up with. That's really where it came from. Once I saw the errata hit, I knew that FN was going to step up in the tier rankings. Bala, we like to play. He's a fun character, and he wrecks face. And with our meta out here, with the 3 and 4 character decks being so prominent, he fit really well into that scheme that we were coming up with. I guess the spice of the deck, like the fun parts, the price of failures and all that stuff, was when I started to put it together and see that I was going to get the same dice in the pool multiple times, 2-3 times sometimes on some of these dice. I was like, well, man, how can I push that? How can I make that happen more? And the price of failure was a perfect fit, especially with a guard guardian character who's going to be eating damage, and at some point you know he's going to die. And you're going to have the idea of the deck is to have FN be the target. You know he's going to die. He's taking damage with the best defense, and people are going to target him because he's so strong. It seemed to be a natural fit to me. It made perfect sense, and we just ran with it from there. And then it was just a matter of tweaks and finding what worked best. I feel the worst matchup the deck has is Phasma. Phasma's probably the toughest matchup. Shout out to Minion from Yorktown down at Jersey's. He's the one who made me make the tweaks that I did last time with the fair trades to kind of combat, what was that, Endless Ranks and the Rise Agains. He was the one that made me actually make some changes to it to tighten the deck up against them. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much where it came from.
Awesome. That's really cool to hear, just the mental process and like how you're considering what's going to rise, what's going to fall. And, congratulations to you, Rick. You took, first place at your local store champ. And we'd love to hear just a quick recap of what you faced off against and, what you had to go through to take that victory.
Yeah, so we ended up with
32
people at One-Eyed Jacks in Richmond. Capped it out. Actually, it was 31.
It was 31. We were one short.
I did get the first round bye, which is always fun. But we had the locals from Richmond, and then a lot of the people that we played out at Jersey's the week before made the trip up to hit air, and they have a lot of strong players out there. So I knew it would be tough, and I knew this was pretty much my last store championship that I was going to be going to. The rest of them are kind of, they're over 2 hours away, and, this was pretty much my last hurrah for the store championship season. So seeing all those Yorktown guys that put up a good fight last time come in kind of gave me a little bit of a downer. But, it was it ended up being a 6-round tournament Swiss with cut to the top 8. So that was about as grueling as you can do it. Let's see, like my first round was obviously the bye, pretty easy opponent there. Second round, let's see, I got paired against a 4-character list. One of the local Richmond guys who's not able to get out to the weekly meetups, but they play a lot in the at the kitchen table. He was playing a very support-oriented 4-character list, but the addition of the fair trade kept him off of the endless ranks. Basically just went after the Guavian first, since I know that he can't be endless ranks, and then kind of spread my damage around. Ended up price of failuring FN to switch everything over to Bala, and I think Bala activated probably 4 times that round, just picking characters off. So that wasn't too difficult. That's basically what the deck's meant to really prey against, is the 3 and 4 list. Then round 3 ended up playing against a Snap Han list, which I hadn't play tested at all against. Kind of made the mistake of going after Snap first, and he was just able to kind of get shields, mitigate my dice, basically drew well, rolled mediocre, but it was good enough to just kind of slow me down until he was able to get to 2 planetary uprisings out, which eventually will just eat you if you can't kill him fast and you can't, claim fast enough for it. So props to him for a well-played match. Then the next round, it's all kind of a blur after 6 rounds plus a top 8. But I believe it was that Tom with the Phasma after that?
I think it was Tom. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was Tom with one of our playtest friends with the Phasma Guavian Trooper list, but he also is running Endless Ranks in there. So I knew that I had to keep him off of that, but unfortunately I was able to discard his hand the previous turn, but of course he drew into it with 3 resources going into that turn, so his first action was to Endless Ranks, and I couldn't finish him off from there after that. So that actually put me at 2 losses. The round before the cut to the top 8, I played against one of our other guys out there with a Vader guard list. And, at that point, we were just making mistakes left and right. But my mistakes were less impactful than his mistakes, and was able to control Vader with the Guardian ability and the best defense, and eked out that win. Going into the top 8. I think I was 7th seed there. Played against Minion from out in the Yorktown area with his Phasma list. Fortunately for me, he's not running Endless Ranks, or at least he wasn't running Endless Ranks last week. Pretty much just picked off the Stormtrooper, then the Guavian, and then was able to get Phasma off. Pretty much that's how both rounds of that best of 3 went. One of the key points was disarming a jetpack off of Phasma, which slowed her down enough to where I could draw into some more upgrades and finally put the finishing touches on her. That went to 3 games. He actually won the first game, and I've been pretty adamant that the best of 3 is almost pointless, but this is one of those times where the winner of the match actually lost the first round. And if you look at it, it's almost 99% of the time that the winner of the first round of the best of 3 is going to win the match in the end. But I was able to do it and prove myself wrong, so I'm glad for that. Second round, in the top 4, played against a Vader Raider. Without fast hands and 4-speed, or fast handing 4-speed, it's a lot easier to control Vader now. The Guardian just picked off whatever he rolled damage wise, and then put my damage towards the Tusken Raider. Not what I would normally do against it, but with Bala, being able to get that extra trigger off of Bala usually is enough to put you far enough ahead. So that's basically what happened. Pulled out another Price of Failure on FN in one of those games to do 3 activations in a turn, which was enough to win. Took him down in 2, but he wasn't rolling exceptionally well, so I feel pretty lucky there. And then in the finals, played against the dreaded Funkar deck. That was just a grueling 3 games of back and forth. I won the first game. It wasn't too difficult. He did get out the Imperial Inspection and Salvage Stand out there, but first turn I was able to get out a 3-cost upgrade with Enrages and overriding one of the ambush weapons. So it put me far enough ahead of that to where I didn't really have to worry about it. Took out Unkar just to keep him off of the disrupt sides, just in case I got the 2-cost upgrades on there. And it was pretty back and forth. Came down to pretty much the last activation to get that win, also with a Price of Failure. Then second game, I made a huge misplay. Talking about the battlefield here, he was running thermal detonators in his list. He ended up rolling the special for 1 resource, and I didn't do anything about it because he didn't have any resources. And of course he claims, and then I realized my folly there. Took 9 damage off of that thermal detonator, and was still able to kind of come back from that to the point where he rolls in enough damage for lethal off of his FN, but I had an ambush weapon and a riot baton in my hand with enough resources to play both. Roll in or play the ambush weapon, hit the 1 damage side, and then all I need to win is to hit any damage side off of the riot baton, and the 50-50 shot failed me. So he was able to pull the second game out, and then the third game was just another back and forth with a Price of Failure being the one that ended up turning the tides to get the win.
Wow, that sounds really just amazing.
I think we started that tournament. I mean, we got to the shop at 11. I think we walked out of there probably about 8:45.
Yeah.
So it was a very long day of destiny, and I mean, I much prefer a cut to top 8 in a medium-sized tournament like that with 30 plus players, people driving an hour and a half away to get there, and the chances of you getting knocked out off of 1 loss pretty high with a cut to top 4. So I'm glad, of course, that they did the cut to top 8. I wouldn't have won it otherwise, but I think that really needs to be taken a look at for next store championship season, where what the cut would be, what the minimum players for a cut to top 8 would be. Just doing the math on that. We've talked about it before on the show, but yeah, the cut to top 4, it just puts too many X and ones out of contention, unless your opponent goes undefeated from your loss. So yeah, finally got the win. I can stop driving 2 hours for store championships and get ready for regionals. So
Well, congratulations. That's really exciting. Your next big event is going to be out at Nova, which, we're excited to be sponsors of. So if you're listening and you're interested in getting out to, one of the bigger premier events, the next big 2 coming out are Gen Con, and then we've also got Nova coming up, which it's just really exciting how many things are coming out with Destiny on top of Empire at War coming out hopefully soon. And that's kind of an easy segue into Fantasy Flight Games announced a lot of red cards this last week, and we're just gonna sit down and go through them. Some of them I think are amazing, and some of them I would love to hear what you guys think, because I'm not super impressed. So to get us started, Jay, let's take a look at the first card that we've got up on deck.
First card we're going to talk about is ATDP. This is a 3-cost red villain support vehicle. Its die sides are 2 range, plus 2 range, 3 range for 1 resource, 1 shield, special, and miss. And its special is discard a support that costs 2 or less from play. So, by all accounts, this is basically an AT cut in half. But I actually very, very much enjoy this card. I think for having 50% damage sides, only a cost of 3, and a special that hits most of the supports that drive people crazy, like Planetary Uprising, or Backup Muscle, or Imperial Inspection, and Salvage Stand. I think this is just a really strong, versatile support that deals damage where it needs to. Like, all its sides are, completely reasonable, and I think it's special, in the matches where you want it, it's gonna do it, and without the ability to blow itself up like it's a larger model. So I think this card is really cool. I think it's a vehicle totally worth playing. A lot of the vehicles that we're going to talk about, once you can get a vehicle into play, Pin Down is an extremely powerful removal card. And I think it's going to see, if your deck runs vehicles, I think it's got a place. And I mean, if you have Weapons Factory Alpha and you play this for 2, holy cow. So I think, while a lot of people want to live the dream and run AT-ATs and get that monster out there, I'm much happier with this guy.
Yeah, I mean, this is, this special is something that is really needed right now with what Jay was talking about with those supports. Unfortunately, it's for villain only, but it makes Finn a little bit better. That's always good. Yeah, I mean, the 50-50 damage sides are great. They're all reasonable. There's really nothing bad about this other than the fact that it's a support, and it just kind of slows you down a bit. But, we've seen, super fast decks, and we've seen reasonably slow decks, and right now reasonably slow decks are getting the wins. So if there is a support deck, with the Weapons Factory Alpha, this is almost an auto include in it as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I like this one. I think it's gonna see limited play personally, and it's definitely gonna be in a support deck mainly. I look at this almost like a TIE Fighter. I think it's really cool. It looks good right now. You want to put it in the deck and see how it plays, but I think in the end it's gonna be one of those cards that's gonna end up being cut out of most decks. But I think in a support heavy deck, yeah, absolutely, it's an auto include.
Yeah, I feel pretty much the same way. I don't look at this card and think, I've got 5 decks I want to put this in. The decks I want to put this in pretty much revolve around Unkar and Thrawn, or Unkar and some of the characters we're about to talk about later. But the die faces are strong with Unkar because you can either resolve damage or you can sacrifice the die and get a really high number for Unkar's effect, especially if you get the 3-for-1. You can just turn that into essentially a free mill. I pretty much exclusively play Unkar in any deck I play, so whenever I see a 3 or higher in my head, it's either I can resolve this for damage, or if I don't want to, it essentially is a 1 discard, and then I get to net any kind of resources I steal from my opponent, which is an added bonus. So I do agree this is probably a limited base card, but what it does have is incredibly strong, and I really, really like that. Also, I did think about this with Finn and Poe, and it is very possible, although not probable, that you could throw this into a Poe and Finn deck and just pitch this from hand to blow your opponent's supports out of the water, which I think that's a very interesting thing. It's probably not very efficient, but if we see some kind of build that allows that deck to be explosive, that could be some kind of tech card to get rid of, Planetary Uprising, considering it is a very powerful and a very difficult card to get rid of right now.
Yeah, unfortunately with Poe, you don't really want to be spending that special to not deal damage, though. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a silver bullet type thing for that situation. If these supports, this set seems to be pretty support heavy. So if they continue along that path, and we see some cheaper supports with dice anywhere near as good as some of these higher costed ones are, it could also be something that you may want to slot in there. But so moving on, next up we have Red Alert. It's a 3-cost event for villains to ready a non-unique red character. There is very few situations where I would want to use this. Non-unique red characters generally do their thing and then they're done. They're there to die. They're there for hit points. Right now, they're there for Guardian, so being able to Guardian and best defense. So being able to Guardian a second time may be useful, but at the cost of 3 resources, it's a little too much for what you're getting out of there for non-unique. If it was any red character, it may see a little bit better use to it for that cost, with the exception of Hux, which we'll get to, but I don't know if this is worth a slot for that effect.
So the way I see it is a lot of decks now try to extend the game using endless ranks, and arguably best case scenario, you can drop a Death Trooper. But what this card does is instead of paying 5 to get a naked Death Trooper, which does extend the game and does increase your health by 10, if you have a completely decked out Death Trooper with ideally training into solid weapons like an F-11 or a Z6 or a rocket launcher, in that scenario, I'd rather pay 3 and try to demolish you again than pay 5 and get a naked guy, unless he's gonna get like a redeploy suite. Those are the things that you have to factor into it. But in a deck that's already doing that, if you have like a totally decked out Death Trooper, 3's a lot. Like, I see that, and I do feel like this was costed with Hux in mind. But at the same time, if you compare like what you're trying to do, I'm not necessarily saying Red Alert is always better than Endless Ranks. It depends on what you're up against, and if you're trying to survive or if you're trying to kill something. But when you look at the card in that light, I think maybe even 1 has a spot for that. Just like I have him right where I want him, I might be able to get the kill or a sick reroll and just snuff him out, as opposed to, again, just passing the turn, getting 5 resources and getting a fresh one that's not as strong as the one that you're about to lose.
I do like the fact that this card makes non-unique characters much more threatening just by the existence of this effect, because generally, say you're playing against FN, Unkar, and a Trooper's generally the last thing you're going to deal with. You try and take out either Unkar first or FN first, and then you wipe off whoever's left, and then that Trooper is just kind of sitting there. But when you're running so many redeploy weapons, they're going to move, and now with this coming into the field, potentially go to the Trooper, which, Unkar makes plenty of money, so you can roll out a Trooper with your redeploy weapons. You could potentially throw something big on him, say your rocket launcher, roll him out, do some damage. Your opponent claims, they don't expect much, and then you could snipe them with some kind of, resource economy gain and have enough money to, ready your stormtrooper and roll them out again for some pretty critical damage. So whether this card gets played or not, I'm not entirely sure because we haven't seen the entire set. But with cards like Hux, with cards like Thrawn, we're seeing a lot of red resource building. And so it does make 3 much more approachable because there's more resources being generated, which means the cost curve of this isn't nearly as restrictive as it was, say, in Awakenings. So we'll see what happens, but I think it might see play but its existence intrigues me for how people are going to have to consider taking out characters now. It's not just going to be leave the trooper, nothing's going to happen with him. You might have to consider the trooper as a threat in the game. All right, our next card is actually probably my favorite from the set, and this is Sienna Ree. She is the Adept Pilot. She clocks in with 9 health. She is 11 points at Elite, 8 points at a single die. Her die faces are 1 range damage, a +2 modified range damage side, 1 disrupt, 1 resource, a blank, and she has an action that states spend 2 resources to ready a vehicle. I love this card for so many reasons. First of all, she's cheap. We love cheap characters because that allows you to slot them in so you can have really unique deck construction. So if you slot her in with Unkar, you're looking at, 13 on Unkar, 8 on Sienna. So you've got a little bit of space to maneuver another extra character, maybe a TIE pilot or something. If you run her with red strictly, say you run her with Ron, you're looking at lots of resources between her and Ron, so you can spend that money to easily A, get out your vehicles, B, ready them a second time. So there's just so many things she does well. Yes, she is squishy. 9 health is nothing amazing. In fact, that's very easy to kill in 1 to 2 turns, so she's not going to be around very long unless you have some way to give her sustain, either guarding away damage or putting on some kind of either a force illusion if you're running blue or armor plating if you're running yellow. But what she does is she really opens up the vehicle metagame, which is my favorite right now because I think support vehicles are very intriguing deck styles because they are very slow, yes, but their damage output is just insane. Say you're running her with someone in yellow, Unkar, for example, you throw out a quad jumper, you quad jump into, whatever you really need, so you can get out a Slave 1, you can get out an ATST, you can get out, an ATDP, you roll them out, get the damage, blow something up, or significantly wound somebody, pay 2 resources, ready them again, and you've just got pressure on the board all day. And the 2 resources are not unobtainable. You get them every turn. So the fact that you're just sitting on the capacity to roll out a major threat multiple times is phenomenal. And it's not a once per turn effect. If you've got 4 resources, you can ready an ATST twice. You can ready an ATST and something else. Like, you can ready multiple things. Like, she's just a really unique character because her effect allows for so many different manipulations of your board state. And I think she's very exciting for the 3rd set.
I too agree that Sienna seems really well slotted for her cost. For her die sides, she's got, 30% shooty aggression. Like, she can deal damage, she can support on top of the supports that she's trying to bring out. So at times you can re-roll her and hope to hit a little harder. Or, just having 2 normal resource sides is really good for, getting out upgrades, getting out the obvious supports. And with just the logistics on one of her resource sides, like, you can activate her ability, and I do feel her ability is pretty potent. She, I think, all around is just one of the more well-designed on a whole characters, and I want to see more like her.
I do like this character. My thing is I like characters with action abilities more than specials so much, because generally they're retriggerable. Well, what's a good word for that? Retriggerable. You can use them multiple times. I like that. I like the fact that you can actually get that off more than once. Her die sides are really good. Again, with the with the yellow deck, she fits really well with a salvage stand and an Imperial inspection. She piggybacks good into that kind of build. She's a good card. And she's got 9 as opposed to 8 health as some of the other 8/11s in the game currently, too. So she is a little bit stronger in that aspect as well. Yeah,
she's very similar to Bala, and Bala one of my favorite characters in the game. Has been since Awakenings, but the 2 resources is a little prohibitive, and I'm kind of glad for that, actually. If it was any cheaper, there's a lot of abuse to be able to continuously activate those supports. So 2 feels pretty good. Again, her die sides are actually really good for her point cost. And like Todd said, she goes right in with salvage stands and Imperial inspections with those faces. So a little bit of damage output, good health for 8/11. All around, she's pretty good.
Alright, so the next card is Fall Back. 4 resource cost, neutral event. It reads, each player may choose one upgrade, starting with you. Discard all upgrades from play that were not chosen. When I look at this card, I think back to my old school Magic days, and this one is pretty much like the old school white card, Balance. You pick one, you keep it, everything else goes away. You even out what you've got. Really like this card. The cost is really big. I don't know how much play it's really going to see. I think it might be a one-of in a lot of decks that are playing red, but I think it's going to be really powerful. I think this card has the ability to have something built around it, especially a support deck. You could run a support-heavy deck with a couple of these, control the board state, and let your supports run rampant. I think it's just going to depend on what else comes out with this set, how good this card's really going to be.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way, that this is better off on a deck that's going to play very minimal upgrades yourself, relying possibly on supports or your character dice for your damage output. And, if you can get rid of, 3, 4, maybe even 5 upgrades with this on your opponent's side, that's going to put them in a real hole, that if you've built up, a lot of supports and a lot of dice in other ways, that, they're not going to be able to come back from that. So 4 cost, with Hux, a lot of these seem to be designed with Hux in mind. They're cost prohibitive, but if you're running Hux, they're going to be better. And in a support heavy deck, you're going to want a lot of resources anyway to be able to play a lot of those supports. So I see having 4 resources as not being a problem for this effect. You probably, unless you're in a real tough spot, if you play this, you're probably going to turn it around and win the game, if you can get to that point.
Yeah, I do agree. The first thing I thought about when I saw this card was, a lot of people are talking about the fun card decks. What do we do? How do we stop them? This seems like the counter, because if you only have one upgrade, you play this, you blow out your opponent's FN and all the stuff that they've played out, and then you start your overwrite tricks and you start to build up your board, and there's not much you can do because you're just sitting on a dead FN at that point with only one thing on him instead of the 3 you really want. Outside of that, it's very possible, but that 4 resource cost is really prohibitive. But if we're going to see more characters like Sienna with multiple resource sides on her, or, even if you play with heroes, you've got characters like Mon Mothma, you've got Akbar, they've got multiple resource sides on their dice. It is possible that you can generate enough money to play this and continue your game strategy. So I feel like this is probably going to be slotted in as a one-of, but it can definitely make a huge impact on where the game is heading and turn it into your favor, very exclusively depending on your timing of when you play this card.
Next up, we have another villain character card, General Hux, the Aspiring Commander. He has 11 health. He costs 1114. His die sides are 1 ranged, 2 focus, 1 discard, 1 resource, special, and a miss. And his special is play a red event from your hand, decreasing its cost by 1 for each character you have. I'm really impressed and intrigued by his design. I find it really cool that he synergizes well with his color, which makes a lot of sense as red has the heavy military theme, and so being able to issue orders more naturally than other characters is just like baked into his design. Having it be a special, you gotta try and make sure to get that special, but then again, having a 2 focus side is nothing to sneeze at as far as maybe turning his other side to a special and turning another die into a nasty damage side or resources or whatever you need. So I find him very versatile. I like that, we've seen some more expensive red event cards, and to some extent they're probably balanced against him, although I do find that many of them are still playable without him. But with him, instead of paying a bunch of resources, you can just remove his die and get some pretty nasty effects. Even, you're probably going to run him in a 3-character list. A lot of people are like, oh man, you can like cheapen out like endless range, which I think is a little tricky because in order for it to be useful, something has to be dead. But I feel like, we're going to see more things like fall Fallback. I think Fallback is a really nasty card, as we just talked about, sort of combating the upgrade heavy meta that we're all used to. You know, if your opponent just slaps out a bunch of stuff or gets some really cool things for their Holocron, and then you roll your special and fall back on them, and you aren't really running upgrades anyway, it's going to hurt them more than you and sort of level the playing field. And so Hux being able to equalize like that, I think is going to be really strong. I think we need to see a little more of what Red wants to do with this set in order to get the most out of him. But I do think just completely in his own design, he's a really well-designed card.
I kind of think that his ability is somewhat of a trap when you're deck building. You're going to build a deck with him in mind, and then you're going to slot in a bunch of expensive events that is going to be great when everything's going fine and dandy and you have all your characters and you're, reducing things by 3 and being able to play whatever you want. But as soon as your opponent starts killing off your characters, those events are going to be harder and harder to play as more, of your characters die, especially if Hux dies, if they target Hux first, to the point where you're probably going to be, not able to play anything in your deck at that point. So I think you really have to, when you're building with Hux, you're going to have to keep that in mind, and you're going to kind of have to put a hard stop on however many high cost events you have in here. The real key here is, being able to play, 1 cost or 2 cost stuff for free, which I think is the more useful ability on here. Being able to remove a die, to play a best defense for free, things like that. But, you just really want to be careful with how many expensive stuff you put in your deck, thinking that you're always going to have this online. And, especially with it being on a die side that you 1/6 chance, because you're most likely going to be running them at 1 die to get the most out of that ability. But otherwise, I think it's a well-designed card. I think it fits the flavor of Hux, kind of perfectly. So, it kind of ticks all the boxes design-wise, but it's going to be very difficult for you to find that happy balance in your deck building.
Yeah, actually, I totally agree with Rick. I mean, looking at him, first glance, you're like, wow, man, that's really cool. And you think of all these cool cards like Fallback and these other cards, or Endless Ranks, or these cards that he's going to have an impact on. And that card that I just spoke of, Endless Ranks, is going to require you to have someone dead, which means it's going to be less effective, and you're going to have to roll it to get it. I think he's going to fit in something else. I think, like Rick was talking about, the lower cost cards, the 1 and 2 cost cards, is where he's going to have a bigger impact. But he's cool. He's sturdy. I like his die sides. I got a feeling he's going to pop up in some kind of discard deck. That 2 focus, and he's got a discard side, and he's got the ability to cheapen some of your card effects. I think he's going to pop up in some kind of discard deck more than anything. At least that's where I would look for him at.
That's interesting, because I actually don't like his dice at all. They're not consistent whatsoever. And the decks I've been playing and the decks that I feel function exceptionally well either have good consistency or they have good ways to control your consistency. That's really one of the reasons why Pomaz was so good, was because Poe can roll damage efficiently, or using Maz, you can focus into whatever you need. So the deck was consistent. Same thing with Emo Kids. You're able to consistently put out damage, and Hux's die faces are so all over the place, which isn't bad because it allows you to use him in multiple spaces, but you're not going to look at this character for consistent results. You're just going to get really good results with whatever you roll out. It's not going to be high numbers, but it's going to be things that you want. I can definitely see where you're going in putting him inside of a mill deck. We just don't have any red events I'd want to play inside of that, which I feel for some reason like you're gonna see Hux in some weird configurations, possibly with FN, in case there's ever red events that come up like rearm for villains, where you can pull back things in your discard pile and re-equip them, because that would just be insane. But he has a really well balanced design. His point cost is fair, his health is fair, his die faces are great for what you're getting, because we've seen other characters with worse points and terrible die faces. So I feel like his balance and design is going to be very unique for what the set offers. And I think when we see more of the set come out as more cards are spoiled, he's probably going to rise in value.
All right, next up we have Ghost, 4 cost support vehicle for heroes. Die faces are 2 range, 3 range for 1, 2 disrupt, 2 shields, 2 resources, and a special. So no blanks on this one. Special is resolve another side of this die. This this is pretty awesome as far as I'm concerned. It's essentially 3 damage sides, or that special is really whatever you want at the time. No side, with a 1 value on it, so you're going to get value out of everything you get on here. Doesn't have the dreaded 1 disrupt. I always feel that 1 disrupt is pretty bad, but it can be good in this meta right now. But 2 disrupt is perfect for knocking out your opponent's full turn resources. There's really nothing about this card that I don't like, other than the fact that it's a support. But hopefully, with all this support love and Empire War coming out, with especially in red here that we've seen, I think it can definitely have a place.
I am kind of blown away by this card personally, just for the fact that it doesn't have a miss. It has a special that literally just does whatever you need. It makes 2 resources, so in essence, a third of the time it can make 2 money, which, I don't know, I've discussed this card with some people and they seem pretty lukewarm about it just because it costs 4. But I mean, you get a reliable die. You get a die that has two resource sides or 3 damage sides, and then the usual 2 that you're not thrilled about, but they're high enough that they could come in handy. This thing is really nasty with it's a trap. I mean, if you trap for special, it does whatever you want, and so this card is an awesome fixer. I'm really impressed with just how jam-packed this card is, and the fact that it's reliable, will come up shortly as we talk about some other cards. But I mean, I sometimes just wonder what people want. Obviously they're why doesn't it do more damage? I mean, when half the die does damage and it can't miss, I have a hard time sympathizing, I guess.
The thing I like about Ghost is the special essentially can be damage that isn't deflectable, and that's something we've talked about a lot in previous shows is, hey, here's my Millennium Falcon rolling out 4 damage. Boop! Deflect to the face. Hey, here's my ATST with deflected damage to the face. And Ghost can reliably roll out the damage. If your opponent's not running blue, you don't have to worry about it. But if they are, and you roll out a special, you're not I really needed damage, because that special is damage, and they can't just throw it back in your face, and it doesn't become something that can be a 2-edged sword. So I do like the flexibility of Ghost. I really like the fact that for 4, you are getting extreme value out of the die faces. You're looking at 4 2s, 1 3, and 1 0. So if you ever get to a point where, hey, you're running Plant Explosion, Ghost is a really viable way to get into the numbers you need. And if there's more cards that say, hey, add up the values of your dice, do a thing, Ghost is great. It is unique, so you can't have 2 of them out, but it does everything you really want it to do at a number that you can easily obtain inside of Red Hero. So I think this is going to see play, not everywhere, but it will see play in support decks that have a strong economy.
Yeah, I totally dig this card. I like it. I think it's got a lot of flexibility in it. I mean, everything that you guys have already said. And I think the flexibility in this card actually gives it the ability to be played more than in just straight damage decks. With the disrupt side and the shielding and the 2 resources, you can actually fit this thing into a lot of different decks and get a lot of flexibility out of this card. And that's a really good point about the deflect damage with the special. I hadn't even really thought about that. That's actually really cool.
Yeah, that's something in my current meta. We had a lot of deflect decks, and so it just kind of made it unfavorable to play big range damage decks, because you would more than likely see it thrown into your face, especially at Star Wars Celebration. Lucas, if you're listening, you'll get a laugh, but there were multiple times where people would just get, hey, I've got Poe, I'm going to put out my Millennium Falcon, I'm rolling out 4 damage, I'm going to go for lethal, deflect to the face, and you're like, really? And it just hurts really bad, because you need to deal that damage, and instead you're taking damage and losing a die, and sitting on a special that essentially is 3 for 1, your opponent can't stop that, and you get to have much more consistency in being able to deal damage safely. And I think that's important, because like I said earlier, consistency in Destiny helps mitigate the luck and the random aspect of the game. So our next character online is Hera, and she comes in at 10 health, 9 points, 12 points for Elite. So this is a very interesting character because Heroes have desperately needed lower costed characters because they're currently just really expensive. So her die faces are 1 range damage, 1 focus, 1 shield, 1 resource, 1 special, blank. Her special is play vehicle from your hand for free. After the action phase ends, if that vehicle is still in play, return it to your hand. I have a lot of thoughts about this card. She's just so many things, and I don't think she's any of the right things personally for me as the way I play. So first off, she's got the same problem with her die face is kind of like Hux. They're just everywhere. So she's not consistent at all. So I personally am not a fan of that because there's things I definitely want and there's things I definitely don't want. And when you're running this kind of character in red, you're probably going to need damage and you're going to need money. And she's got 1 damage and 1 money. Sure, the focus kind of can help fix some of your die faces, but it is self-cannibalizing. So take that as you may. I definitely don't care about the shield at this point in the meta. When the new set is fully spoiled and released, that could change. But, 1 shield isn't really the thing I want. Her special is really good. It's amazing because you can get astronomical value out of her. If you're playing her with yellow, you can throw out a ghost for free. It does, of course, it bounces back to your hand, but we'll get to that later. So you can throw your ghosts for free. You can throw out, if you're running yellow, you get Millennium Falcon. Big thing I've seen people talk about is you get Quad Jumper out for free. Roll your Quad Jumper, get the effect, and then use the action to jump into something. And her effect essentially gave you a permanent vehicle on the field, which I think is probably one of the stronger combinations. But realistically, she's just not consistent enough. And like Rick said earlier for Hux, I feel like she's a trap without some other character that's consistent, which you might need to run her with like an Akbar or something that's going to allow you to hit that special more often than not, because you're really running her for that special. She's got an amazing effect, but if you're just running her for her die faces, there's probably stronger options out there. And I'm kind of conflicted about her. I don't think she's awful, but I think she's extremely, you got to build around her and she's kind of niche. What do you guys think about it?
Here's the thing about heroes, right? Rey is probably the most played hero outside of Pomaz, whatever, but her die is hot garbage. And people still love Rey because of her ability, right? And more importantly, they love her because of her point cost. So Hera falls right into that Rey point cost, still got 10 health, and a pretty good ability, especially when you factor in Quad Jumper into it. You're not going to lose the vehicle like you would potentially with Poe if you don't have enough resources to play it afterwards. You're going to get that die. You do have to roll it in and hope that it rolls at something, so at least that's tempered a little bit. But just the fact that she's 9-12 with a relevant ability and a good hit points, she's going to see play somewhere. It's like Rey is literally only played because of her ability. Like if her die does anything in a turn, then you're happy with it. I can definitely get behind the non-consistent die faces on here, but they are doing something. There's no modified size on her dice, so you're always going to get some sort of value out of it. You're hoping for that special 9 times out of 10, but if you don't, you're at least going to get something, unlike Rey, where you're mostly going to hit modified sides that you can't resolve without some help. You're going to re-roll Rey 5 times in a turn, hoping she hits something and never does. At least with Hera, you're going to get something out of it. Yeah, she's going to see some play at that point cost and that ability,
So I'm going to cheat a little and talk about another card since they go hand in hand with this, but we have to talk about Reckless Reentry, which is a 1-cost event for heroes that allows you to re-roll a vehicle die. If you roll a miss, discard that vehicle. That is completely meant to synergize with this amazing ability. I have to say, you're playing her for damage. She definitely brings damage. That's what her effect is going to do for you. Dropping some of these really expensive vehicles into the play and then hopefully rolling them out, maybe using Reckless on Falcon or Ghost, which is no threat to you. On top of Reckless Reentry, Hero also has Strategic Planning from Awakenings, which allows you to exhaust or ready a support. It's a little slower, but again, the resources that you're saving on this ability allow you to just machine gun these giant supports for really devastating effects, which, you can get a lot of value out of very quickly early in the game, since the resources that you would be spending to play these effects, instead, you're just getting the value out of the dice and smashing face face. And again, like, she is a red character, and like red hero always gets to high five itself because it's a trap. You can potentially like one or double resolve her special off of an it's a trap double special and just go to town. Like, you know, and granted that's like dream scenario. You have to have the cards in your hand, but like it's one of the many plays that you have available to you in this deck. And, you know, if you don't use it for that, you can probably use it on the vehicles that you're dropping. But a lot of what Rich said, you know, 10 health is great. Her point cost just fits really nicely with a lot of lists that people already like, and we still have some more characters to see. I feel like she is a solid amount of value on her dice, and I think she's going to see a fair amount of play personally.
So next we've got Natural Pilot. It's a neutral upgrade for resource cost. Die sides are +2 range, +3 range, 2 focus, 2 disrupt, 2 shield, and a blank. And it's got a passive ability on here that says after you activate attached character, you may ready a vehicle. Now, this one right here, I don't know. Like, I need to see more of the set before I decide how much of this I really like. You're talking about a 4-cost upgrade. You're probably going to have to overlay something to get it in effectively in a deck that's going to be playing a lot of supports. So I'm not 100% sold on this. I really like the ability on the card, but yeah, I think that's expensive, especially when you're talking about playing it in a support deck to really get that, to benefit from it. Because the benefit is actually in the ability more than the die sides. Die sides are great, but I mean, the ability on the card's what's going to sell it.
As I have said many times with my love for Unkar, when I saw this card, I just gasped because I'm really excited to run Unkar and Thrawn. And, you know, you have enough money to get out your quad jumper, which you then cheat in to get out something big, which I like to play out the ATST. Being able to just roll out an ATST, any of those die sides are viable if I want to deal damage, or if I want to use Unkar's effect to eat a card from your hand. Putting this out on either character, if I get the modified sides, I'm more than happy to sacrifice that to Unkar to eat a card out of your hand. If I roll this out, I get a +3 modified side, and then I roll out my ATST and get the 5 for 1. I'm fine with dealing 8 damage for 1 resource. This has got all the things that vehicle decks really, really enjoy, and it's super nasty. Outside of that, for hero, I'm not entirely sure where this is going to fit in, because they don't have the strength of economies to just punch out 4 resources nearly as efficient as Thrawn Unkar does. But I just think this is so good in very specific decks, because it does exactly what you want. Like, if you roll 2 focus, that's super good, because you can just use that to focus your vehicle die. If you get the 2 disrupt, okay, you can trigger your Imperial Inspections, you can eat your opponent's resources. 2 shields isn't bad either, but, you know, other than the blank, there's nothing on here I don't enjoy seeing when I'm running this with vehicles, because most vehicles are only base damage sides, so you're probably going to get those modified sides to resolve somehow.
One thing important to remember with heroes is you can rearm this on top of an overwrite. So using your natural resources, you could slap this over a promotion or a DH-17 with your regular turn resources. I mean, the thing that like you really have to be afraid about is whoever you put this on is like probably gonna die. So choosing the right character to stay alive, you know, I find this card interesting because like theoretically Sienna can help you get there, but she's probably not the person to put it on, even though seems to be one of the best pilots in the stories that she's in. But I'm intrigued by this card. It doesn't necessarily scream in a lot of cases like play me now, but again, with like the versatility of rearm, and if we have ways of like making money in other aspects of the game somehow, I could see this being pretty nasty. And again, you know, if you can do Hera shenanigans and then roll out a different guy with this on it and get even more value out of those free vehicles, like it could be really terrifying. But I don't think we have the easy route of getting there just yet. Next up, we have a very divisive card, as I've read in a lot of the reactions and I've spoken to a lot of players about, and that is Imperial Backing, a 2-cost red villain event. Ambush. Play a support from your hand to decrease its cost by 1 for each character you have. So a lot of people saw this and were like, wow, this is how we did our ATSTs out. We play our 4-character lists and so on and so forth. And like in that reality, you like sort of saved 2, but you also paid 2 to get there. So it didn't quite help you as much as you would like. What I think, and this goes a long way towards what Rick said earlier, but I think the secret to this card is you have to think small. And a lot of times you're going to look at this card and you're going to think like, it saved me 1 resource. Like, it's just logistics, but I find this card to be so much more strong and impactful. With a 3-character list, you could just slap down easily an ATDP or a TIE fighter with your starting resources. You can also do quad jumper shenanigans and ramp heavily into all the things that quad jumper can bring you, and usually that card can make you money or things of that nature. You can even play speeder bike, which a lot of people really liked playing speeder bike when they tested it. It has a phenomenal special side. If you can get it out for 2 with ambush, like I think people are undervaluing, the value of this ambush side. Like everyone's like, I hate playing supports because they're slow. That's why this card exists. It gives it ambush, and if the stars align, if you play this card with Weapons Factory Alpha, you can play a Slave 1 on turn 1 for your first action if your deck is yellow-red. And then, even more so, this synergizes fairly well with General Hux. Granted, you need a fair number of cards in your hand, but I feel like that's going to be what you're trying to do regardless, getting supports out. And so if you run ATDPs, TIE Fighters, Slave 1, Speeder Bikes, like that's already like 10 cards in your deck that more or less synergize extremely well with this card. I mean, it's a logistics, except you immediately get the card in play, you immediately get to spend the money, and it's an ambush. Like, this card does a heck of a lot, and for people who want to make supports relevant, like this is the answer.
Yeah, unfortunately for me, this kind of goes back to what I was saying with Hux, though, that you have to at least 3 characters out in order to get value on the resource side of it. Yes, you get the ambush, you can roll that die in immediately, whatever, but once your characters start dying, you're not going to get as much value out of this. And that's all in with the fact that you have to have that support in hand. I am glad that this is villain only, so that you can't use it to play a Planetary Uprising and immediately claim or something along those lines. But it's great in the beginning of the game and horrible and not going to get you back into a game if you're losing. So yeah, I see everything that you're saying, Jay, but is this going to deserve a spot there in my decks for this? And I just don't know if it does enough in there.
I kind of see where both of you guys are coming from, and I'm just kind of waiting to see what we get from the set before I make a judgment on this card. I like what it does. I just don't like how it does it right now, because there's not a lot of targets I personally want to see. But it's hard because the utility of this card is astronomical. Like, there's been tons of games you guys have talked about where you said you were like 1 damage away from winning the game. And in my head, I saw this with, oh, you can just play this, get a free backup muscle, and then activate the backup muscle to win the game. Because you're always going to have 1 character alive before you lose the game. So for 2 resources, you could win the game with that 1 damage you just desperately need to be unblocked. Or if there's more supports that come out for villains that you can activate to do things, this is perfect. You look at this card initially and you think, okay, so I'm going to play this to get a support vehicle out, but you can also use it to get supports that aren't vehicles onto the field. So I think as the game grows, this is going to allow Imperial backing to have much more playability. I like it at the 2 cost, because at 3 it would be really terrible, and at 1 it would be way undercosted. And the ambush effect is just great. Like, it's so good. It's kind of like swiftness. It's this underrated effect where you look at swiftness and you're like, why would I pay 1 to give my next card ambush? Well, because action sheeting something in is really good, and being able to pay 2 to get something onto the field, and then you can resolve dice, or you can claim, or you can trigger set support effect, whatever it is, like that ambush flexibility is really great. So I think this card has a lot of potential. I'm just intrigued to see where that potential opens up to.
Yeah, I agree, actually. I was looking at it more for supports than vehicles, like Imperial Garrison, something like that. Something that has an impact on the game long term from the time it hits, and then using your ambush action to further an advantage, or press that advantage that you're trying to get from the support you play. That's where I see it coming in and being more powerful than actually just with the vehicles. Because right now, it's also, if you're looking at low cost vehicles to play right now, what do we have? We have an X-Wing, we have a quad jumper, and we have a speeder bike.
TIE fighter.
A TIE fighter?
Not an X-Wing.
Not an X-Wing.
Yeah, TIE fighter, my bad. So yeah, we have a TIE fighter, a quad jumper, and a speeder bike. Those are probably your best cheap options for this right now. Even at that, even with an ATDP, I mean, it's pretty good. I like the fact that it blows up a support, but I mean, I don't know. I feel it's better with other than vehicles right now. Just got to see what else comes out with the set.
All right, next card we have is Rally Aid. It is a 1-resource red hero support, and it has an action. Exhaust this support to reveal a random card in your hand. You may play that card, decreasing its cost by 1, or by 2 if it's a vehicle instead. I don't know how I feel about this card. I mean, its value is all day. So, like, the first card you play, you've already netted a value of 1. Like, the card is paid for itself. So that's good. The problem I have with this card, and it just keeps on going back to that consistency I was talking about, is you reveal a random card from your hand. Thank God you do not have to play it. If it said you must play this card, I would hate Rally Aid. The fact that you may is good. So the problem I have is, first of all, say you don't have any vehicles in your hand. Okay, so you're only getting a 1 decrease. And then on top of that, if you reveal an event randomly and you don't want to play that event, or you don't have the money for that event, you just kind of gave information to your opponent for free, and you're not going to actually do anything with Rally Aid. So, and you kind of blew an action. Like, sure, it isn't a bad thing to have an action you don't use if you're trying to stall out your opponent. I don't know how to feel about this, because like the randomness could just be really rough. Of course, if you use this late where you only have 1 or 2 cards in your hand, you want to play both of them, that's fine. And the nice thing about the game is you can mitigate what's in your hand. So if you've got like 2 vehicles and 3 events and you can't use the events, you could like strategically pitch them to reroll dice, activate Rally Aid, and get a guaranteed vehicle to resource discount. So, I mean, you can strategically play around the negative parts of this card. It's just really situational, and I think it's good. I just don't know, like, how good it really is.
Yeah, I think this is definitely best played when what you're wanting to play it with is the last card in your hand, just to get rid of that randomness. This would not be something I would ever do as the first action of my turn. If I'm going to play this, it would definitely be where I can control it, and I happen to have the last card in my hand as something I want to play for cheaper, and then I would use it. I don't know if I would necessarily play it, but that's about the only time I would use it.
I agree with Rick. I mean, I think it's a late turn card, but I mean, even at that, like, that's not something I want to put in the deck for me. I just don't see where it's worth it. I mean, I see the value in the card, but having a card that I'm going to play only as a last action of my turn to get something else out, it's just I think there's going to be better cards for that slot.
All right, next up we got Rookie Pilot, 7 cost hero, 7 health. Die sides are modified 2 range, 1 shield, 1 resource, a blank, and a blank. With an ability of, after you activate this character, you may reroll 1 of your vehicle die. And probably the most derpy die face you could see ever on a card. It's a 7 cost hero that we've been crying about forever. Unfortunately, it's not the prince that was promised. So, I don't know. He's 7 costs, so you can never discount 7 cost characters that do something. That, you know, First Order Stormtrooper is, if you look at tournament breakdowns of characters played, is one of the most heavily played character on the villain side, and it's almost only for that 7 points to be able to fit into something, to get that extra character, to get a little bit extra health. His +2 and +2, they're not bad. You're going to need some heavy non-modified range die supports for it. You know, being able to reroll a vehicle die, I mean, that's relevant. It's an ability. It's not just a blank character. So, I mean, he'll see play when you want 7 points for 7 health and some red in your deck and you're running some range, but he's not what First Order Stormtrooper is.
Yeah, I have to agree. Someone brought up a really interesting point. If you put Rookie Pilot and Ezra at 7 points next to a First Order Stormtrooper, like, the Stormtrooper is just a god in comparison. And I just don't know what to think about Rookie Pilot, because by himself, he doesn't do anything except give you a shield, he gives you a resource, or he gives you blanks. And sure, you could say, well, he activates and then you get to reroll a vehicle die. Yeah, but you have to pay for it, and he alone isn't really capable of producing much to help get that vehicle onto the field. So sure, he's a synergistic character. I just don't like the fact that he's like 1/3 modified sides, 1/3 blanks, and then 1/3 utility. I mean, like, sure, we're spoiled rotten with First Order Trooper, where if you roll something, it's probably something you want. With Rookie Pilot, like, I just don't know. I don't know how to feel about him, because my biggest thing is we haven't seen the whole set, so there could be something that comes out that makes Rookie Pilot really, really good or really, really playable. I mean, you could put a DH-17 on him for one and give him some base sides to add to the modified sides, but then the DH-17 also has modified sides, so what if you roll him modified and the DH-17 modified? So then, for sake of consistency, you would really want to put on a 2-cost upgrade, but then, like, do you really want to put on a Rookie Pilot? Because at 7 health, if it doesn't have redeploy and he dies, that gun just falls off and it doesn't go anywhere, and you don't get much value out of it. So there's just so many things to consider, and none of them seem amazing. Like, sure, the hero's got a 7-point, 7 health character, but it still seems to pale in comparison to what the villain's got, and that just kind of disappoints me.
It's always a slippery slope comparing a hero to a villain directly, because, I mean, pound for pound, you also have to remember all the cards that support them. I'm going to sound like a broken record today, like Sudi with Unkar, but heroes it's a trap, and, like, that makes him hit, like, that makes you have to respect him. It's not something to sneeze at, for his cheap costs. No one will agree with me, but I mean, he was designed with, this upcoming vehicle meta in mind. Like, Trooper was designed to be a damage character, and like, a lot is packed into him. He's an iconic, Trooper drudge chud that you roll in and you throw away. And on the flip side, Pilot was designed to be something that interacted more with vehicles and less for just heavy direct damage, like just on his own. And while I do see the unfairness that, in the meta that we're in right now, villain just has the like hard punching cheap guy, and like heroes do somewhat get shafted. I don't think like Rookie Pilot was ever going to be the Stormtrooper equivalent, and it sucks that you have to wait more predominantly for whatever it would be. So again, like, I don't think it's Rookie Pilot's fault that he's like weird. I do think he has some advantages for his cheap cost. It just would be better if Hero had other ways to leverage in cheaper characters. So I understand that this, wasn't the droid you were looking for wholeheartedly, but at the same time, like, in a design perspective, like, he fits the role he was intended, which understandably is not what you wanted to round out your deck and get some cheaper stuff going. So I hear you, I understand you, I'm on your side, but like, there is some things that he can do. You drop 2 of them, and then you have yourself a 16 cost, character, and do some trap combos or something with rocket launcher, and suddenly like he's paying dividends. But again, those are dream scenarios. He dies easily. He has all the other disadvantages, but some people kind of think he's worthless or he's just a 7 coster. But I mean, like, there's tons of range sides available in Hero, and focus is a very prevalent side in Hero as well. And so again, he's not the character you were hoping for. He's not a trooper, but my argument is he was never meant to be.
So while y'all were talking, I took a look at Star Wars Destiny DB and realized that Finn is 16 points elite. So, from what Sugi was saying, getting a redeploy weapon that, cost 2, you're looking at F-11D rifle goes on really well with Rookie Pilot. And, I'm not saying it would be a good deck, but with It's a Trap and Finn bringing in villain weapons in there, you could be a fun deck to play there with Finn and a bunch of rookie pilots, getting some villain vehicles in there for him to re-roll dice and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I try it maybe.
And one thing I just want to reiterate again quickly is that a lot of people have been evaluating many of these characters strictly from a like how much damage can they pump out standpoint. And while Awakenings and SOR both reinforced that sort of lens that everyone's treating a lot of these to, you have to remember that a lot of this set isn't trying to be character role damage, and it's hard to get excited about them when we've lived in an environment where those are the cards that get the most done and you get the most value. And we still need to be convinced that slower methodical decks can compete with that, but this set was designed with the slow support meta in mind. So characters like, you know, you look at Thrawn, it's like he doesn't deal any damage, and it's like, yeah, but he makes money for a million billion years, and then you drop really expensive stuff out. Hux saves you money, so you can play, you know, powerful effects to support what you're doing. Sienna makes you money so that you can drop these supports and then use that money to then make those supports, you know, lay waste. So try to understand that, like, while we do have characters like Mace and K2SO who are just ungodly beat sticks, some of these characters, like, they're not going to stack up in the damage category, and they were never meant to. And maybe, you know, they won't be what you want, and maybe the full meta that they're trying to create will merge just with this set. Hopefully, you know, we get enough pieces and it all comes together and we can make some fun things that aren't just, you know, brainless aggro decks that we've been seeing lately. I think a lot of these characters were designed with the intent of, you know, decks that do more than just roll your character, roll damage, put weapons on them. So I don't know. I'm excited about a lot of these characters personally, for their trying to billow out to the design space, and time will only tell whether they can survive to do that. But, you know, I'm hopeful.
All right, so next we've got Shield Generator. It's a hero common, 1 cost support. It says before one of your supports would be discarded from play by an opponent's card effect or die, you may instead discard this support from play. So we got an ammo belt for supports right there. Is pretty much what that is. That's definitely going to be in a support deck. There's not a whole lot of anything else that's going to go into. The one thing that's kind of questionable about it is almost like Ammo Belt was. This one also says supports, so it will protect vehicles, it'll protect planetary uprisings, it gets to protect all your fun stuff. So that makes it kind of interesting as well. Interesting, but like again, like we were talking about, we're seeing all these cards in a vacuum. Until we get to see all of the supports that they've got planned for us, it's really hard to plan something like that and see how good it's going to be.
If cards like ATDP really do, like, make a splash, this is a good card to try and keep your, especially your uprisings going, which I know a lot of us feel like, you know, we'd rather just be able to get rid of uprising and be done with it. But yeah, this card's interesting. I agree that we just need to see how much, like, support hate's coming or how that shapes the meta for this to be necessary. But I do think, like, it's thematic and it fits its role well. So overall, I mean, I think the card is designed well, but we'll see if it's actually enough to matter, especially if you don't draw it quickly enough.
Yeah, I feel pretty much the same way. In a vacuum, I have no idea where this is going. In future sets, this could be very powerful if we see a lot of support removal. Right now, we've only really seen Surgical Strike, ATDP, ATST, not many effects overall, just flat out get rid of your supports. So we'll see where it goes. But I do like the theme, like you were saying, Jay. You know, we interviewed Lucas a while back and he was saying things that the Empire and the villains are very much just using things and throwing them away. Everything is expendable. You just throw your first order trooper in, they die. You throw another one in, they die. You bring them back with endless ranks. Like, everything is expendable, whereas the rebels are kind of poor and they just have to put everything that they can together and form this kind of a MacGyver system where, you know, they have to use one thing for 3 different items. And so Shield Generator meter thematically for me is just brilliant because it keeps your stuff alive longer at a really fair cost. One resource is great, but if you don't see a lot of support removal, then you just have a 28 card deck and then 2 free rerolls sitting around. So we'll see where it goes, but I do like when cards come out with a really well designed theme for the structure of a hero or a villain, because having this be neutral I think would be unfun, because villains are going to blow things up all the time and heroes just aren't. So having heroes have some kind of way to combat that is thematically unique.
So before we get to our last card, I do want to especially mention the 2 cards that we don't know what their effects do, but have pretty amusing art on them. We have All Quiet on the front, which just has 2 guys chilling out, hanging out probably on Hoth, but I'm amused by the guy on the left who just doesn't seem interested at all in what's going on. But I am blown away by what I can only imagine is called Commandeer, which shows an Imperial officer just like double dragon kicking Max Rebo for even getting near his speeder bike. I don't think Max Rebo has the anatomy to ride a speeder bike properly, so I can't even begin to understand that card. I want it on a playmat right now. This should be the next World's Prize. Like, I looked at that card and I laugh hysterically, but I can't wait to see what that card actually does. But alright, so lastly we have Y-Wing, a hero red support vehicle for 3. Its die size are 2 range, 2 disrupt, special, miss, and its special is force an opponent to deal damage to their characters distributed as they wish or lose resources until they have dealt and lost a combined total of 4. I think this card is really stacked, personally. A naked 2 range side, 2 disrupt side, which as Rick brought up earlier, like that's a very threatening number just on its own. So even if you like roll that and that wasn't what you wanted, that'll keep people from resolving for money, and that honestly happens a lot. Vader does that to me all the freaking time. And then 2 special sides, which one way or another deal 4 damage or take out their money. And sure, you can think, yeah, but like you can split it up however you want to. That's still 4 damage for you're not paying anything outside of obviously the cost of this card to do that, and it's not super hard to hit damage on this dice. It is a 50-50. I mean, you're not going to reckless re-entry this thing unless you're braver than I am. It's 2 sides that do 4 damage is huge, and then a 2 range side, it turns on your rookie pilots. Like, can't ignore that. I think this card's really stacked, and it having 2 blank sides does not detract from its 2 immensely powerful special sides. And obviously it's a trap, but just I don't know. This card, I'm impressed. I know a lot of people think it's weird and it's unreliable, but I think this thing hits hard and is a really abusive closer, and it's a die that your opponent's going to respond to, which draws attention from your characters. Holy crap.
Yeah, I think this is a really, really strong card for hero. Heroes have just always seemed to be kind of behind the curve in terms of X, Y, and Z, and this is not behind any curve. In fact, the first thing I thought about was this is like Poe's best friend for 2 reasons. One, you can just throw this out as a special and, here's 4 damage to the face or 4 resources or both. I mean, the mix and match of 4, however you choose. So 2 damage, 2 resources, 3 in 1, whatever. It's so flexible that it's amazing. But the other thing that's great is being a vehicle and 3 resources. As a Poe player, it is probable to save up your money to have 3 money. And so you can throw this out with post special, and then you can actually pay the resources to put this on the field permanently, which means you can roll it again for potentially another spread of 4 damage, resource, choke, however your opponent sees fit. And that is just devastating. Sure, Y-Wing has 2 blanks, but if it didn't, I think that would probably be unfair. If this card had 1 ranged on top of the other die faces, it would just be way, 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 way too good. The 2 blanks are fair. And I love what it does. Sure, yes, people have said, well, what about your opponent choosing this, that, and the other? Okay, that's a fair question, but they can't choose 0 on their resources. If your opponent has 0 resources, they can't choose to eat no resources and fulfill the Y-Wing. They have to take the 4 damage. So it's not that weird mixture, kind of like Let the Wookiee Win, where you can, avoid some of the damage because of the way the card is worded. Like, you have to take the 4. And 4 damage for 0, especially for hero, is so beneficial because that helps give them the damage output that they need. Even though the speed of the support is low, the damage output is really high.
Yeah, I really like this card as well. I think this one's going to be fun. I feel like once it's on the board, it's the first dice you put in your pool, because you make your opponent have to deal with it when it hits something. I really like it. I'll be playing it as soon as I can figure out supports.
Yeah, normally I don't like cards that give your opponent the choice, but this is, no matter what they choose to do, it's something that you want to happen anyway. And like Todd said, this will be the first die I roll out if it's on the board, and they're either gonna save their resources to be able to save some damage, or they're gonna just have to eat the 4 to the face. So I mean, this special is just, it's bonkers. This is one of those supports that I think has a place outside of a dedicated support vehicle type deck. It's like, if I'm playing red, I'm putting 2 of these in there. The 2 blanks, I mean, I'm okay with the 2 blanks if I can get 2 sides that deal 4 or disrupt 4 or any combination thereof, plus the disrupt 2, plus the 2 range unmodified. It's worth it. I mean, Riot Baton is one of the best upgrades out there right now, and it's got 2 blanks, and I'll play that in any villain red deck or Finn deck. So it's this will see a lot of play, and you're gonna have to force your opponent to make some tough decisions or get rid of that die.
So the thing I like about this is it also combos well with other cards from the set, including Roll On, which allows you to reroll a single targeted die up to 3 times. So you have ways to get that special off consistently. Sure, you have to spend some money or you have to blow a card, but still, like, just having this on the field as a threat is so good. It's what heroes really needed. And the nice thing is it gives you choke and it gives you damage, regardless of if you roll the special or you roll the other sides. You're going to do something you really want for a reasonable cost. Like 3 resources is really fair. So I'm excited to see this in hero decks because you can use it for damage or you can use it to help kind of choke your opponent out. It's just got so many things I love. All right, so this has been a fairly long show, but we've got just all kinds of stuff that we got to talk about, and it was a blast having you on. Thank you for joining us, Todd. We really appreciate coming on the show and giving us your insight into your deck and just helping talk about all of the new cards that have been spoiled. So thank you, everyone, for sticking around with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who's been joining us and hanging out on Discord, on Facebook, on Twitter. We really appreciate your interaction, and we've got so many things coming out with the new set, with Gen Con, with Nova coming out just for you guys. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This has been a great show. We have gone through so much information, and there's just so much more coming out over the next couple of weeks. We've got a lot of surprises in the works for you. So enjoy your week. Thank you for joining us, and may the Force be with you.